Hey there, I'm Rick, but my buddies call me Head. I work as a broadcast engineer at WBDK, a local CBS station in Atlanta, Georgia. I've got a fancy graduate degree from MIT in electrical engineering and computer science, and I also picked up another degree in broadcast technologies. I've been working in this field for 22 years, taking on some challenging roles along the way. Before landing here in Atlanta for the past 5 years, I hopped around various TV stations on the East Coast. I'm 46 years old with dark hair, and I'm 6 feet 3 inches tall, weighing in at around 190 pounds. Some folks might say I'm good looking, but I'm no TV heartthrob. Been happily married to Sharon for a solid 22 years, and we've got 2 daughters, Melanie and Stephanie. Melanie's already tied the knot, and Stephanie's just about to graduate from college. Sharon stands at about 5 feet 5 inches, doesn't weigh more than 135 pounds, and rocks long blonde hair. She's a real sweetheart, both inside and out. These days, she's working as a secretary for our pastor, Reverend Bob Shelter, and she's been doing that job for the past 1.5 years. Now let me tell you about last Friday. I had some extra time for lunch and decided to surprise Sharon by taking her out. I parked at the church office's side entrance due to the rain, hoping to get closer to the door. However, when I arrived, I found Sharon's office empty. Still, I went inside. While I was waiting, I overheard Sharon talking to Pastor Bob in his office. She was looking forward to Monday night and mentioned how great it was that I work on the Monday night football games for the station because it gives us a chance to spend time together. She also asked about a reservation at the Inn. Pastor Bob assured her, "Yes, it's all set. I've booked the Whirlpool suite again. Come over here and let me show it to you right now." I heard some rustling of clothes and then Sharon's moans. I was shocked, on the verge of feeling sick, and my anger was building up. I knew I needed to leave before doing something foolish. I couldn't bear to listen any longer. I had the urge to barge in and confront them, but I hesitated because I knew I'd lose control and maybe even get physical. Given my emotional state at that moment, I was certain I'd end up kicking both of them. However, I didn't want to face the consequences of my actions, so I made the tough decision to turn and leave. It was one of the most difficult things I've ever done. I wanted to lash out, but I walked away. I was pretty sure neither of them noticed me or knew I had been there. They had security cameras watching the main entrances of the church, but I had entered and exited through the side door without being spotted. I was so shaken that I realized I wouldn't be able to focus for the rest of the day. I called my workplace and explained that I wasn't feeling well, saying I needed to go home. I needed time to think about what had just happened, and being at home seemed like the best place to do that. Sharon wouldn't be home until after 4 p.m., giving me ample time to process everything. It became evident that Sharon was having an affair with Pastor Bob, and I decided that I couldn't continue to consider him my pastor. What I really needed to uncover was the full extent of their relationship, how long it had been going on, and what had led to it in the first place. I understand that some people prefer not to delve into these details because they believe they don't matter, but I'm not one of those people. I desperately wanted to understand why this had occurred in my seemingly wonderful marriage. A marriage that, in Sharon's eyes, apparently wasn't as wonderful as I thought. She wasn't the sweet person I had believed her to be, and I was determined to uncover the truth. I wasn't weak, and I was determined to get to the bottom of this situation, ensuring that both of them faced the consequences of their actions. Once I arrived home, I brewed a pot of coffee and went outside to sit on the patio, hoping the pleasant weather and fresh air would help me think clearly. I needed to make sense of everything that had happened. I won't deny that I shed a few tears that afternoon because I did. I understand I don't own Sharon or her body, but it deeply hurt me to think she'd been sexually involved with another man, or perhaps more, when she had promised herself to me on our wedding day. Some might not take those vows seriously, but I did, and I believed she did too. Such a situation makes you question your entire set of values and wonder if you've been foolish your whole life to believe in faithfulness and love, and all that comes with it. Regardless of what anyone says, the most damaging part of a cheating partner isn't just the physical act. It's the loss of trust in them and everything they say or do. It's like throughout your whole marriage you thought they had your back, but now you realize they don't, leaving you feeling exposed and scared. Despite being 6 feet 3 inches tall and weighing 190 pounds, I felt vulnerable and frightened. It underscores how a cheating spouse can affect a person's emotional well-being. As I sat there, Battling my emotions and trying to stay calm and logical so I could process everything, I realized there were things I had questioned in the past but let go because of the trust I had in Sharon. These were little things that didn't seem significant at the time, but had now formed a heavy lump in the pit of my stomach as I connected the dots. How could I have been so foolish? It was trust, plain and simple. I had put my trust in her, and today, that trust lay shattered. What I needed were cold, hard facts. I wanted to know why this had happened. I wanted to understand the duration, frequency, locations, and who else might be involved. My trust had evaporated, and I was determined to find the answers I needed. As an update, I didn't think I could face Sharon just yet without revealing my feelings, so at 3 p.m., I decided to leave the house before she returned. I drove into town and stopped by the station to pick up a few things I'd need for the next couple of days. I popped into my boss's office and asked for a couple of days off early in the week, explaining that I was dealing with some personal issues and not feeling well. He agreed, so I left and went to Frankie's to hang out until I had to go home. Around 5 p.m., I called Sharon to let her know I'd be stopping for a while and wouldn't be home for dinner. She seemed annoyed with me and mentioned how she was feeling amorous tonight, and I would have been in for a treat. However, my plans were already made, so I told her to keep the mood hot for me, assuring her I'd take care of her when I got home. She replied sternly, "Don't count on it, mister. If you think you can treat me like that, you won't be getting anything for a while." Deep down, I thought to myself that this was precisely what I wanted to happen. I arrived home around 10:30 p.m., feeling quite intoxicated, but not too drunk to notice the bedroom door was shut and locked. I smirked at that and knocked on the door to see if she was awake, though I doubted it. I yelled, "Fine, if this is the game you want to play, then don't expect any intimacy from me, just deal with it." With that, I headed for the spare bedroom. The following morning when I got up, she was sitting at the kitchen table sipping her coffee. I could tell her coffee got a bit colder when I walked in. If I hadn't known she was an unfaithful wife, I certainly would have sensed something was amiss. I gave her a friendly smile and said, "No need to get up and make breakfast, honey. I'll grab something on my way to the golf course." I then headed out of the kitchen, walked into the garage, loaded my golf clubs into the trunk, and drove off. Shortly after, my cell phone rang, and I noticed it was her calling, so I chose not to answer. A few minutes later, I heard a beep, indicating she had left me a voicemail. I listened to it, and it was a message filled with anger, asking how I could do this to her and demanding I return immediately. The truth was, I had no intention of actually going golfing. I had used that as an excuse to buy myself a few hours to handle what I needed to. My destination was my former church. The last thing I wanted was to hear Bob preach again. It was still early when I arrived, so I knew there was a good chance no one would be around, and I was correct. I entered the building, having a key since my wife worked there. I made my way directly to the offices with the goal of placing remote micro cameras and mini microphones in her office and Bob's office. It didn't take me long to set it all up, and I concealed the transmitter behind some old hymnals in the supply closet across the hall. I had the receiver in my trunk, and I wired it into my car's electrical system. This way, I could monitor their conversations and activities whenever they were in their offices. While I didn't expect them to do much at the church, I was confident that I would gather valuable information by watching and listening to them for a few days. Once I was sure everything was functioning correctly, I snooped through her desk but found nothing of significance. However, I did notice a large asterisk on her calendar for Monday, which aligned with what I had overheard on Friday. I would be prepared for whatever might happen on that day. Next, I entered Bob's office and conducted my search there. I didn't have much luck finding anything incriminating, but just when I thought I was out of options, inspiration struck. It was ironic, considering I was in a church, but I had a thought. I decided to check the filing cabinets for church expense receipts. Lo and behold, I stumbled upon a file containing several receipts from the La Inn in Roswell. Some were from the end of 2019, and a couple were from the spring of 2020. Realizing I was pushing my luck by staying too long, I hastily made copies of the receipts to take with me. I then tidied everything up and made my exit. My next move was to head over to the golf course and park in my usual spot. I made my way to the clubhouse and gravitated towards the bar. I wanted to ensure that a few people there would remember my presence. I found a table in the back and ordered a Sprite, spending a couple of hours there. During that time, I scrutinized the receipts carefully and discovered that the 2 from late 2019 were both for Mondays, and the 2 from the spring of 2020 coincided precisely with dates when I had attended a conference at CBS headquarters in New York. What infuriated me the most was that Bob had the audacity to charge those motel rooms to the church, disguising them as conference room rentals for meetings. He was rendezvousing with my wife in a motel, and I had unknowingly footed the bill. While we had been contributing to the church, I decided that there would be no more donations from me. Their reckoning was drawing near, and all I needed was a bit more evidence to seal their fate. I was certain this affair had been ongoing for close to a year, if not longer, which aligned with the hints I had picked up on earlier. My hunch was that Bob had been involved with her even before she started working for him. She had a good job as a receptionist at the Telfor Corporation, but she eagerly accepted the opportunity to work for the church, saying, "Honey, it'll be so close to home, and I'll be working for the church. What could be better than that? Plus, the pay is almost as good as what I was making at Telfor. How can I pass this up?" It sounded great. Closer to home, church employment, and nearly the same pay. However, it was clear she was more interested in the extra perks. I couldn't believe how blind I had been. It filled me with anger, but it also sickened me to think that my loving wife could betray me like this. I was determined to make them pay for their actions. I decided it was time to do some investigating. I went out to my car and connected my iPod to the frequency of the receiver I had in the trunk. After scrolling through a few minutes of data, I saw Bob enter his office. He picked up his phone and made a call. I regretted not having placed a bug on his phone, but there was nothing I could do about it now. I had to settle for hearing one side of the conversation. "Yes, Sharon, I'm at the church. I came right after you called me. Why don't you tell me what's bothering you?" I thought, has he ever done this before? I see. What do you think set him off? Then he asked, "Do you think he's suspicious of anything, Sharon?" With a laugh, he continued, "All right, well, you can get back at him on Monday night." After hanging up, he sat there and thought. Just as I was about to shut down the transmission, he mumbled something almost inaudible, but I managed to capture it. I made sure to save that soundbite, knowing it might come in handy later. After shutting down, I drove back home. I figured it might be a bit chilly there, so I started mowing the lawn and took care of some basement chores. When I walked in, she didn't say much to me, but the tension in the air was palpable. During dinner, I chose to ignore her, and she sat there, staring at me. Eventually, she tried to start a conversation by asking what had been bothering me lately and why I had been acting strangely. I responded by reminding her that she had locked me out of our bedroom the previous night, and that I rarely went out with my friends. I pointed out that the one time I did, she had become upset and made threats, so the situation was a result of her actions, not mine. In frustration, she retorted with an expletive. I noted that her language didn't align with the behavior expected of a devout Christian woman, considering her strong faith. Her reaction clearly displayed guilt on her face, and I couldn't understand how she thought I wouldn't notice. Nonetheless, she managed to regain her composure and eventually left the table. I thought to myself that when everything came to light, she wouldn't handle it gracefully. Later in the evening, she entered the family room where I was watching television with slightly reddened eyes, indicating that she might have been crying. The rest of the evening unfolded without any major incidents. When I was ready for bed, I walked down the hallway to the spare bedroom and settled in. A few minutes later, she entered the room and stood there. I asked her, "What do you want?" She inquired, "Aren't you going to come to bed?" I replied, "Nope. You've made it clear that there won't be any intimacy in the near future, so I might as well get a good night's sleep alone in here." With that, she left the room in tears. Honestly, I didn't care. On Sunday morning, she woke me up at 8 a.m., dressed for church, and invited me to join her. I declined, explaining that I had no plans to attend. She left the room with a certain look on her face, suggesting she was beginning to understand the situation. Later, she left the house, and we didn't exchange many words throughout the day, each retreating to our respective rooms. Monday morning, I left the house without encountering her or engaging in conversation. She called me, her voice heavy with tears, expressing her apologies and love. I assured her we would discuss everything upon my return that evening and hung up. Then, I contacted my boss, informing him of my day off but confirming my commitment to covering the Monday night football game. He was satisfied with my availability and asked how things were going. I replied that they were proceeding as expected. My next destination was the Ladot Inn in Roswell. So there I was, walking into the motel lobby, trying to look like I was just another guy on the job. I spotted the clerk, a young dude named Kevin, who seemed more interested in his phone than the comings and goings around him. I walked up to him with a clipboard in my hand. "Hey, got a service call for the Whirlpool suite," I said, tapping on the fake work order I'd put together. "Some complaint about the AC making noise? You know how it is with this heat, right?" Kevin gave the clipboard a once-over, his brow furrowing a bit. I kept my face straight, all professional-like. "Which room?" he asked, sounding a little puzzled. I told him the suite number, and for a second I thought he might call my bluff. But then he just nodded, handed me the key card, and said, "Make it quick, all right?" I was in the room in no time, dropping my tool bag down. But instead of wrenches and gauges, I had my little high-tech gear, mics, cameras, you name it. I was playing the part of the maintenance guy, but what I was really doing was setting up my own sting operation to catch my wife in the act. Installation was a breeze. I hid them so well you'd never know they were there. I was out of the room as quickly as I'd entered, giving Kevin a nod on my way out. "All set. No more noise from that AC," I told him, and he barely glanced up from his screen. I left feeling a bit like James Bond, if I'm honest. Kevin had no idea, and I was one step closer to knowing the real deal with my wife. Wild, huh? With plenty of time on my hands, I decided to attend to a few other tasks I needed to prepare. I visited our bank and obtained cashier's checks for half of the funds from both our checking and savings accounts. Afterward, I canceled our joint credit cards. Following that, I contacted my broker and arranged a meeting shortly after lunch to make adjustments to our investment accounts. I also reached out to my attorney to discuss the divorce and other legal matters. We scheduled an appointment for later in the afternoon when he would be available. Next, I drove to Planters National Bank in Marietta, Georgia, where I opened new accounts in my name only and deposited the cashier's checks. I had lunch in Marietta, although I didn't have much of an appetite. After finishing lunch, I headed to my broker's office to discuss the investment portfolio changes he had prepared. These changes divided our investments equally without selling any assets to avoid unwanted tax implications. I took the paperwork with me. Following that, I met with my attorney to review the divorce papers he had drafted. I proposed a no-fault divorce with an equal split of assets if my wife agreed to sign them immediately. If she refused, I had him include a provision for filing for divorce based on adultery. I was fairly confident she would sign them right away. With everything taken care of, all I had left to do was grab dinner and then head to the station to oversee the Monday Night Football broadcast. After leaving my attorney's office, I turned on my cell phone and discovered a couple of messages from Sharon. In her messages, she expressed concern and asked me to come home before the game, stating that my recent behavior was worrying her deeply. She professed her love for me and how torn apart she felt seeing me like this. Despite being aware of her plans for the evening and my own knowledge of them, she could still send me these messages. It made me question my judgment, thinking, I must be the biggest fool ever to have loved and trusted this woman. I had reached a decision. The only possibility of salvaging my marriage rested on whether she would show up at the motel tonight. Her decision would be a clear indicator of whether she cared enough to try to rescue our relationship, acknowledging its precarious state. At 8 p.m., I activated the system in fully automated broadcast mode, and Monday Night Football commenced. I configured the system to monitor the feed from the motel room. Precisely at 8:15, Bob entered the room and initiated a call, telling her, "Hey baby, I'm in the room, get over here as quickly as you can." Sharon replied, "Okay honey, I'll be there in a few minutes." After ending the call, he muttered a few more words that I overheard, though I would need to listen again later to confirm the exact content. My marriage appeared to be unraveling, and while I didn't anticipate her ending it, the pain still cut deep. This experience only reinforced my determination to make them face the consequences. I took out my list of people to contact and began dialing, a task that consumed nearly half an hour. Sharon had already arrived at the motel, so I returned to monitoring the video and audio feed. She expressed, "Oh God, Bobby, the thought of you being intimate with me excites me so much. I really value these nights together, she confided. In response, Bobby invited her closer, saying, "Tonight, darling, I'm going to fulfill your desires." She responded, "I adore it when you talk passionately to me, Bobby." My heart sank, and a nauseating feeling washed over me. Here were a pastor and a church secretary along with my once sweet and loving wife, descending into a dark abyss of depravity that I couldn't comprehend. In the moments that followed, I would witness just how twisted they could become. They both deserved the consequences that awaited them. There was no doubt about it. She positioned herself on the bed, and I couldn't bring myself to describe it any further. The person who had once been the love of my life. He finished his act, and I understood that our future together was irreparably shattered. Though consumed by agony, my seething anger kept me focused. If they had seen me in that moment, they might have cowered in fear and dread. At that point, I had lost much of my humanity. My sole purpose was to bring them to justice. After enduring their actions for 45 minutes, I had seen enough. It was halftime during the football game, and it was time for the halftime show. I switched the system to live assist mode and began playing back the recording of Bob and Sharon from the beginning. Within minutes, the phone began ringing relentlessly. I chose to ignore all the calls and took out my cell phone. I dialed Sharon's number, and the ringing echoed through the monitors. She glanced at her phone and remarked, "It's Head. This time I won't answer his call. Let's see how he likes it." I hung up and dialed again. "I suppose I should answer it," she finally conceded, retrieving her phone from her purse. Sharon responded with a venomous tone when I greeted her, saying hello. Curious about her whereabouts and intentions, I asked about her location and what was happening. She explained that she had gone shopping since I hadn't called her earlier and planned to grab some food before heading home. In a somewhat sarcastic tone, I inquired if she was shopping at the moment, to which she confirmed and mentioned her intention to spend a significant amount of money. Unable to hold back, I retorted by thanking her for being such a wonderful wife, with a touch of sarcasm. In response, she shot back, telling me not to speak to her that way and expressing her confusion about my recent behavior before saying goodbye. There she was, using that term again. No, Sharon. The real issue was Bast Bob in her motel room. As their activities appeared to be winding down and she was taking one last shot, I contemplated interrupting it. Knowing she wouldn't answer her cell phone again, I dialed the motel number. "Kevin, it's Head. Aren't you watching Monday Night Football? No? You should be. Could you ring the Whirlpool suite for me?" After just 2 rings, he picked up. "Hi, Bob. Can I speak to Sharon once more?" She came on the line, questioning why I was calling. "Well, Sharon, it's like this. I know you've been unfaithful, and I'm well aware of your location and activities. I plan to file for divorce, and you'll find yourself without a place to stay. Bob might also face some consequences." Confused, she asked, "What are you talking about, Head? I can't make sense of your recent behavior. What's going on with you?" I simply replied, "Sharon, the charade is over. I suggest you turn on Monday Night Football and enjoy the halftime show. I'll see you later. Goodbye." I watched on the live monitor as she went to the TV and tuned in to MNF. "Oh my God, no!" she screamed as she watched the streaming video of herself and Bob engaged in their activities. Due to a time delay in the live feed, she witnessed a substantial portion of what the entire Atlanta area had already seen. Her response was limited to repeating, "Oh no," as she hastily got dressed and fled the room. Bob was equally frantic to leave, uttering curses all the while. "I will kick that son of a bish. I will kick him," he muttered, unaware that his muttered words could come back to haunt him. Once they had vacated the room, I promptly turned off the monitors and allowed the video stream to continue for 1 more minute. Then, I switched off the live assist mode and returned the system to its fully automated broadcast mode. I retrieved the tape and left the broadcast booth, knowing it might be my last visit to the building. I took a few personal items from my desk as well. I spent the rest of the night at Frankie's, and yes, my performance during halftime became the hot topic at the bar. After the game concluded, I hailed a cab and headed home. When I arrived, I found Sharon sitting alone in the darkened living room. The phone had been disconnected, and it was evident that she had been sobbing uncontrollably. Her tears didn't move me. As far as I was concerned, it was all over. She cried and asked, "How could you do this to me, Head? After all these years together, how could you?" I responded firmly, No, Sharon. The real question is, how could you do this to me? I'm drunk, and I'm going to bed. We can talk tomorrow. She remained motionless as I left the room and retreated to the spare bedroom. The next morning, I woke up with a nasty hangover, and she was still on the sofa with dark circles under her eyes. It appeared she hadn't slept at all, but again, I didn't care. She had brought this upon herself. I nonchalantly put the phone back on the hook, and it immediately began ringing. For the next hour and a half, I fielded calls from family members, including her parents, friends, church acquaintances, my now ex-boss, and both of my daughters. They were deeply upset by what they had witnessed, and nothing I said could console them. I understood that it was harsh for them to have seen what they did, but they were adults and would eventually move past it. I also received a call from Mrs. Bob, who inquired about whether I had kept a tape of the entire incident. I assured her I had a copy securely stored and would provide it to her if she needed it. It was evident that everyone I had called had watched the Monday Night Football halftime show, and they didn't hesitate to let me know. Some were angry due to its explicit content, while others, like Sharon's parents, considered my actions terrible for exposing her like that. However, most people were sympathetic and understood my perspective. It was a challenging ordeal, but it was the price I had to pay for my actions. Sharon remained seated, sobbing throughout the ordeal. Eventually, I left the phone off the hook once more and went to prepare some coffee. When I returned, I offered her a cup and handed her the divorce papers and investment documents she needed to sign. I stated, "Sharon, I'm filing for divorce. After discovering your infidelity and witnessing what I did last night, it's clear you've been cheating on me for at least a year or longer. There's no way I can continue in this marriage." I held up the papers. "These are the divorce documents, and if you read them, you'll see I'm requesting a no-fault divorce and proposing an equal division of our assets. To proceed with this, you must sign both the divorce agreement and the agreement for splitting our investments right now. There will be no negotiations or modifications to these documents. They are entirely fair to you," I explained. "I'll give you until 5 p.m. today to consult with an attorney and confirm that my offer is fair. At 5:01 p.m., the deal is off the table and I'll file for divorce on the grounds of adultery. I'll seek a property distribution based on both our individual contributions, with mine being significantly greater than yours, and our respective incomes. In essence, I'll go after everything I can. Let's be clear, this is the best deal you can get, so consider it seriously," I warned her. "And in the end, it would be unwise to contest a divorce based on adultery when the whole of Atlanta will know it's the truth. Everyone will know you've been unfaithful. This is what you wanted, as I overheard you tell Bob. Your wish has been granted, and now everyone knows it. Take the deal, Sharon." Desperately, she pleaded, "Head, I love you and I want to save our marriage. Can't we try to work this out?" I responded firmly, "That may be true, Sharon, but it doesn't matter. Love is irrelevant. I won't remain married to you. Our marriage ended when you chose him over me, and whether you believe it or not, that decision was made when you engaged in your affair with him. Now, I'd advise you to freshen up and consult with an attorney. Time is running out," I suggested. Later that afternoon, she returned home with the papers. "My attorney recommends that I sign these papers, Head. He believes you've made a fair offer given the circumstances, and he thinks I should take this settlement," she said. "Head, can we talk? Can you listen to me and perhaps consider forgiveness and working together to salvage our marriage?" I agreed to sit down and listen because I genuinely wanted to understand why she had done what she did. I also wanted to know if this was the first time it had happened in our marriage. We sat at the kitchen table and she began explaining everything. She revealed that there had been no other affairs before this one. It had started shortly before she began working for Bob. She admitted that she didn't really understand why, because she had been completely happy with me, but she couldn't deny that something had drawn her to Bob. She mentioned his charismatic demeanor and the feeling that he loved her. I acknowledged Bob's charisma, but shattered her perception when I played back 2 sound clips I had saved. The first was Bob muttering on the first day, "That idiot better make sure her husband doesn't find out about our affair." The second soundbite was from the room just before she arrived. "I'm going to use her tonight. Tomorrow I'll end it. If she causes any trouble, I'll threaten to tell Head. That should keep her in line. I can't risk her husband discovering our affair and exposing everything. So, Sharon, not only did you damage our marriage, but you were mistaken about Bob's feelings for you, I pointed out. No, Sharon, there's no way I could continue our marriage for 2 reasons. First, you broke our marital vows, and I can't live with that. And second, you would never find happiness with me again either. I could never satisfy you after this. No, Sharon, no matter how much love there might be between us, it wouldn't be enough to overcome the damage you've done to our marriage. She just sat there crying, knowing that what I said was the truth. In the end, she signed both sets of papers. I informed her of my decision to move out, allowing her the time she needed to find a new place to live. I didn't believe she could afford the house, and to be honest, I didn't want to stay there either. Our agreement stipulated that the house would be sold, with the profits split evenly, just like our other assets. Besides, the house held too many memories that I wanted to leave behind. I gathered the paperwork and bags I'd prepared the previous day and left the house. I headed to my broker's office to drop off the papers and then checked into a hotel for the night. The following morning, I had an appointment with my attorney. We discussed the divorce papers, and he agreed to file them with the Superior Court of our county that same day. During our meeting, we also delved into the predicament I found myself in at the radio station and with the FCC. My attorney explained that the FCC had the authority to issue civil fines, revoke broadcasting licenses, or deny renewal applications. Furthermore, those found guilty of violating these regulations in federal court could face criminal fines and a maximum prison sentence of 2 years. Given the circumstances, my attorney believed that jail time was unlikely, but substantial fines and the end of my broadcasting career were inevitable. I would have to seek a new line of work. In just a matter of days, the consequences of my actions became painfully apparent. I was served with legal notices from the FCC and had to prepare for several days in court to defend myself. I won't bore you with the intricate details of the case, but suffice it to say that the fine imposed on me amounted to nearly a year's worth of my salary, depleting my savings account. Even worse, my broadcasting license was revoked, and I would be prohibited from working in my field for the next 2 years. However, there was a silver lining to this dark cloud. TT had watched Monday Night Football as well, and despite the illegality and vindictiveness of my actions, he showed me compassion. He offered me a job with responsibilities that complied with the FCC's restrictions. It seemed that he had experienced his own share of troubles in his recent divorce, particularly at the hands of Henry's daughter and Peter's sister, which may have softened his stance towards me. I suppose I did have one thing to thank HJ for in the end. Bob confronted me once at Frankie's. He seemed ready to throw a punch, but somehow I managed to hold one of his arms tightly. "Listen, Bob, I don't ever want to hear from you again. Is that clear?" I stated firmly. He grumbled, "Fine with me." I felt like giving him a final kick. "Bob, I possess an audio recording of you making threats against me. If I take that to the police, I believe I have every right to obtain a restraining order against you and possibly press assault charges. With the evidence on hand, you could end up serving time in prison. Is that what you want?" He shook his head in disagreement. As I delivered one more kick for emphasis, I added, "Well then, I suppose this will be our last interaction." He is no longer a pastor. He lost his job with the church, and the denomination revoked his license and nullified his ordination. The last I heard, he was working at a city travel agency. His wife divorced him on grounds of adultery, and she received a substantial settlement. I'm moving forward with my life. It's not perfect, but I'm finding ways to be happy. I've dated a few women over the past several months, but haven't gotten into a serious relationship. When the right woman comes along, I'll marry her. I know it's just a matter of time, and I'm willing to invest the time to find the right person for me. I occasionally run into Sharon. We both attended Stephanie's college graduation and the baptism of Melanie's first baby. I was polite, but I made it crystal clear that I had no interest in friendship or any kind of relationship with her. It was evident to me that she wasn't happy. I could see she was emotionally suffering from our breakup and regretted her actions. However, the issue was not her regret, but her betrayal of me and our marriage. If I were a different person, maybe I could have forgiven her, but my values are quite inflexible, and there wasn't much room for compromise. She will have to live the rest of her life with the knowledge that what she sacrificed for her affair with Bob was me and our life together. I was just an ordinary man who loved her deeply, but she chose to discard it all. Yes, she let go of me. Regrettably for her, she also forfeited any semblance of respectability, as anyone who witnessed her infamous performance during the Monday Night Football halftime show knows that she is an unfaithful wife. Rumors suggest that she receives numerous date offers. To her credit, she has declined them all. It's not a very fulfilling way to live life, but I didn't do this to her.